So good morning, Debbie. It is so nice to be able to be with you and to just hear us think together. Would you mind just introducing yourself with everybody before we get started?
Absolutely. And good morning to you too. I'm Debbie Perez. I am the Director of Professional Learning and Contemporary Instruction for Humble ISD.
So now you have memorized that whole big long title. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about this in terms of, like, this was a tough year and you really took on a new job in a tough year. What were some of the biggest lessons that you learned from it?
Yeah, I tell you, one of the first things that we learned to recognize about ourselves as leaders and professional learning and in the support that we provide teachers for instruction, we had to really kind of stop and reflect and check our assumptions. So when teachers were struggling, when leaders were struggling, when students were struggling, it was very easy for us to go, well, they need support with X, Y, and Z. Because in our previous position prior to the pandemic, we understood very well and could really speak to the pulse of how things were going in the classroom because we were present. We had focus groups. We really understood and knew the direction that we were going for our district. And when the pandemic hit, we had to force ourselves to not make those assumptions and really dig deep and talk to our students, talk to our teachers, talk to our leaders, and be present in that environment to reassess what kind of support we had to provide for them.
So that's really a big deal because what you're saying is that when you were checking your assumptions, you were really hearing more voices in order to check your assumptions. So talk about that.
I would almost say sometimes that you didn't even know you were making that assumptions. I can tell you there were a few times when we gathered together and we'd say we'd hear teachers say, well, students are not logging in, or we're having an issue with kids accessing technology. And so, we just create this mini professional learning or support system and ask teachers to email students, to call home and do all those things. And it took us, we had to step back a little bit and go, we're making assumptions that one, they're not doing that. We're making assumptions that we are the vessels of answers in these problems, and we need to engage them more and not just sharing what the problems are, but also trying to figure out how together we can create a solutions, because at the end of the day, they were the practitioners now, and we were learning from them.
Well, that's really an interesting insight. So the whole idea that you started moving toward co-creation with them, so that problem solving became something that you really co-created solutions to, meant you also had to check your assumptions and make sure you were talking about the same problem.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So how has that influenced what you'll do next year when everybody hopefully is back at school?
Well, one of the ways that we, like you mentioned, learn to not just check our assumption, but co-create those solutions is that we've started some more official voice groups. For example, early on last year, we met with a couple of students, about 20 or 30 students in middle school, about 20 or 30 students in high school. And they shared some of their concerns and problems they were having with the systems that we put in place. We, as a teaching and learning department, for our teachers during the virtual learning experience. And from that, the insight, the feedback, the input was amazing. It just reminded us that students are not just valuable to give us that input, but there was a possibility to actually problem solve together and co-design together. So from that, we created our Student Voice Campus Ambassador Group.
Wow.
Where we had, I know, 125 students from all the high schools represented, and they got together with us last spring, helped design some of the sessions that teachers were actually engaging this summer. They not only designed sessions, sometimes they led sessions, sometimes they were just participating in the sessions. For Portrait of a Graduate, as an example, they developed the learning activities that we created with teachers and actually co-facilitated those sessions together. So it was just something that, because we started it out of the necessity of the pandemic, it actually fortified our vision for how we can impact our instruction in the classroom, and it really includes student voices in that vision. And so we're continuing that. And so this year we've got up to 6 times where we're going to be meeting with them and engaging in authentic assessments, engaging in engagement strategies and lessons, so that teachers themselves can also partner with students and really value and benefit from that voice.
Well, that must have an enormous impact on your vision for what you really want to see. If you were to talk about your aspiration or your vision for this whole thing, where are you hoping it's all going to go?
I want students to not just be a voice and not just give input, but begin to really create solutions for our districts. And if we're going to be a true campus ambassador, that means that they're not just coming to the district and giving feedback, but they're really leaders. They're thinking of problems that we're experiencing and how can we together as a district, as students, really work to solve that problem. We've made a few steps with our tiny house projects as an example. And so we need more common experiences like that as a district where students are really leading that process. And so our job then becomes, if that's where we want to move to, how can we impact instruction and structures in the classroom so students are motivated and students are self-navigating through these large projects and are leading through these projects.
So when you think about that, and I know you in particular have worked on managing impulsivity, so I know that there are some habits of mind that you've just really paid attention to. Tell a little bit about, for example, how you've been thinking about the influence of the habits of mind on you yourself in your practice.
I think the idea to really think flexibly, really allow myself to think from the perspective of the teacher, of the student, so that I don't, just make assumptions, so that I don't think I have the answers, so that I don't get frustrated when my own assumption doesn't go the way it goes. I think that thinking flexibly was a huge skill that as a team we had to get really grounded on. And it's work that we still need to continue to do as we develop leaders. And then, of course, managing impulsivity, because I am a task-oriented individual who these are the ways of perfection and how we're going to get there. So how to really step back as a leader and go, okay, so if we're really examining the landscape of where we're trying to go, what are the voices that are going to contribute to this? And how does the way that I lead through this process going to actually get us to that success?
So it's really been an influence for you in terms of growth as a leader, as I'm listening to you and hearing you talk about it. And of course, what I know about you, because I've had the privilege of knowing you since you were a teacher, to a coach, to the leader of the coaches, to your professional development perspective now. So what an incredible journey you've had. When you think about that, is there anything else that you would say about what really strikes you as the most important ingredients for leaders to be paying attention to?
I think there is, of course, the understanding that we've got to always keep the why and the vision in mind. And it is that why and that vision that has allowed me, as an example, to practice better habits. Even when it's not the most crucial that I practice that habit, because the more I practice, the better that habit is going to really emerge when it's really necessary and I really have to depend on it. As an example, like you mentioned with managing impulsivity, I practice those strategies even when I feel like I didn't need to. I was very verbal about it. I had my sticky note and people knew what my goals were. And so they allowed me to kind of play through those scenarios. But when it really mattered and I didn't have the second to look at my Post-it to manage my own impulsivity, I had already kind of established those practices myself. So it became more manageable for me. So, but all of those sacrifices, all of that practice, all of that growth was really because I had the larger vision in mind. And that's what really motivated me to keep growing in those areas.
And when I hear you talk, I think your larger vision also includes students right at the center of it all. That's
Absolutely.
really what you're hoping for.
Absolutely. We have an incredible leadership, an incredible vision that has really allowed our students to take center stage in their learning experiences. And so as a leader, we've got to let that platform kind of take place. And so what are the habits that I have that get in the way with that? We've got to be able to identify them and check ourselves with them.
Well, I really so admire and appreciate everything that you're doing at Humble. And, this is not a small district. So
No.
if you can just let people know just how large this district is, and therefore the incredible scale of the enterprise that you're really envisioning.
We've got about 45,000 students, 15 secondary schools, brand new middle school we just opened, and about 30 elementary schools. So it is a pretty large school district. But even then, finding opportunities to really create structures and systems so it doesn't feel as alienated. And the work that we're doing has really allowed us to build a family around this.
Well, thank you so much for being with me for these couple of minutes. I could talk to you for hours because I love your vision, and I also appreciate the privilege of being a part of it. So thank you so much, Debbie.
Thank you so much.